Welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is Monday, October 6th. This is week 7 of Georgia's 2025 college football season, and this is the week of the Auburn game. So we are facing to facing to Jordan-Hare Stadium Saturday night, October 11th at 7:30 p.m. The Dogs will be on the road for just the second time this year. Before we can get into the Auburn series, though, we need to go back and take a look at what happened in the Kentucky game this last week. And let me stop for a moment and say a word and say, I'm sorry to all my fans and followers out there. I know we kind of dropped off the radar last week. The Daily Dawg is not very daily if you don't show up for the podcast. And I appreciate those of you who've gotten used to listening to the Daily Dawg and jump in. A couple things happened all at one time. I had a huge unexpected change in my personal schedule last week, which made getting the podcast done difficult. Then we ran into some storage and computer issues. The way we've been recording the podcast and the attempted videos that we've been working to put together and start coming out with the video podcast created some storage issues on the computer. When we tried to change and delete those, everything or move those around, everything fell apart. Probably more detail than you want to know, but long story short, it took 3 or 4 different efforts to revamp the storage capacity and the software which we're using to record these. I did do 1 or 2 podcasts, but they failed. The files came apart, and I just did not have time to re-record them when the files were corrupt and wouldn't work. So I apologize that we missed the end of last week. It probably would have been a lot more sad stories lamenting how we felt about Alabama. It would have been great to preview Kentucky and dig into a few of the things that we normally do, looking at the coaching from the other team. Mark Stoops has been there a long time, so we have a lot of data to look at. Mark Stoops versus Kirby Smart has a lot of numbers to look at there. So there would have been a lot to take apart, but by and large, the game played out as expected, and now we're going to dig into that and take it apart from this side of it. So again, I apologize. I will try to make sure that we don't have any more big gaps in our podcast and that the Daily Dawg is truly the Daily Dawg. Also, I'm going to try to work harder to make these podcasts. While I have felt good about the content I'm bringing you, and I've tried to make the point over and over again that I feel like this is a conversation between me and you guys out there. And it's very much a one-way conversation. It's as if you're listening to me. You called up and said, hey, tell me what you think about the game this week, or tell me what you think about what's going on with Georgia this week, or maybe some prompt of a question. And then I just went on talking while you put me on mute and worked out or cleaned or drove or did whatever it is you do around the house, do laundry, whatever it is you do when you listen to a podcast like this. And I think that's kind of the way I've wanted this to feel, is one good damn dog to another getting together and talking about Georgia football. But I do think that it's possible, while I feel good about the content I've been bringing you, I think I could bring a little more structure to it, try to shorten it up a little bit so that if we do need to go longer, we'll just do more podcasts. We'll segment them. We'll do part 1 and part 2. We'll try to put more topical podcasts out by topic, one at a time, rather than trying to cram so many topics into one session. So I've worked a little harder to try and come up with a format, tell you what we're going to do in each one so that you could kind of listen ahead and know where to find it. Maybe eventually the notes will also help you to be able to find these a little easier. So I do intend to keep these a little bit shorter. Like I said, the target would be, I'd love to keep them as short as 35 minutes sometimes. That's probably unrealistic the way I seem to go on about our favorite team. So I'm thinking 45 to 55 minutes is going to be the goal. I'm going to try and cut it off there. And like I said, if there's more that seems necessary, then let's just do a part 2, or let's break into a whole different segment and try to break it into different segments. So I hope you'll appreciate that I have tried to take some time while I was away from the daily podcast this last week and bring you some improvements in the Daily Dawg. Also, I want to get back to getting more written content on the Daily Dawg so that you can go to thedailydawg.com and you can see some of the things that I've been breaking down. Maybe you'll see some charts in there with some stats. You'll see my top 10 or 15 or 12 lists. Just a word about that. When I put a top list out, honestly, if I get to a point where I don't think anybody's worthy, it might be, maybe I only get to 13. I don't think that we need to be hung up on the idea of ranking the top 10, the top 15, the top 25. I think we should rank the teams that are worthy. But we are talking about our playoff contenders. And last week, it would have been nice to take a look and say, well, where does this put us after the Alabama loss? But frankly, I feel better about getting back into the whole thing about comparing ourselves to the other teams out there vying for the SEC and the national championship, or at least getting into the playoff. I feel a little better about getting back on that horse after a win, and I bet you do too. So I think there was some good that comes in it. We're almost at the halfway point of the season. This is week 7 of the season, but we have played 5 games so far. This upcoming game against Auburn will be our 6th game. And so that's 6th out of, as I talk about, the guaranteed 12 games. We expect to make a bowl game or a playoff game or an SEC championship game or all of the above. And so hopefully we'll have more games. Last year, Georgia played 14 games. Year before, they played 14 games. Obviously, in 2022, we played 15 games. Same thing in 2021. We went 14-1, won the national championship. The next year, we went 15-0, won the national championship. So those were 15-game seasons. So hopefully we'll have the chance to be together for at least 13, 14, maybe 15 games. And with the current playoff setup, maybe even 16 games. It's possible for a team, I suppose, under the very wrong circumstance, to maybe play as many as 17 games. If you played, let's see, 12 games in the regular season, you played your conference championship game, that would be a 13th game, and then somehow ended up in the playoff in the situation where you had to go through 4 games to win. So that would be 4 games. So I guess in that scenario, you play in your conference championship game, lose, you get a first round game, and then you end up winning all the way to the national championship game. And win or lose, you would have played 17 games, which is hard to imagine, but certainly possible. So, all right, that's a little housekeeping. Let you know what's been going on with the Daily Dawg, where I expect to go and where I hope these podcasts are going to go, and get a little bit more content out there for you to peruse when you don't have time to read or you want to look through some things a little deeper. And that's what I'll try to do. I'll try and take some of the content out that maybe I've sort of gone on in the deeper detail here, and maybe put it into some written information that you can peruse a little bit at another time. So let's take a look at what we're going to do today. Today is we're going to review Kentucky. We didn't get a chance to get back to that. I'm sure you've read through, you hopefully watched the game or went to the game. You probably listened to some other people talk about it by now. You've certainly maybe looked at the box scores or the stats, or read the articles in the paper or wherever you read them. But we're going to go back through and take a quick look at Kentucky. And we got 3 segments today in our podcast on our Kentucky review. So again, trying to be very segmentized here, give you guys something so you know what to expect. So segment number 1, I'm going to just hit through some first impressions. And I've made notes, and I have 4 first impressions. So then we're going to go into key game stats, numbers, and moments. So that's pretty much what it sounds like. And then our third segment of the day will be standouts and callouts. So standouts are just people that I noticed, took note of, or everybody took notice because they were that much of a standout. And callouts might even be negative callouts. You know, like last week we called out the coaching a little bit, feeling like there was something that needs to be addressed when you have a couple games in a row, like the Tennessee and the Alabama game, where the offenses for the other team are just able to move up and down the field on you like a hot knife through butter on multiple drives in the first and second quarter. It feels like they seem to know what to expect from us defensively, and it looked like we didn't know what to expect from them offensively, or we certainly weren't able to do anything about it. And so as much as the players have to execute, and I'm sure the coaches will say they do the best they can and they look for the players to execute, I also look for the coaches to give the players a little bit of a leg up. And it feels to me, as I mentioned, like maybe our way of always playing our game when we don't have the kind of physical, overwhelming talent we used to, maybe we need to start looking at throwing some surprises in there, throwing some wrinkles in there, so that everybody doesn't know exactly what to expect from Georgia when the game starts, and then they're able to take advantage of it. And that's what I feel like maybe the trend had pointed to. So that's a call out to the coaching, right? Say, hey, guys. And certainly I had my thoughts about the 4th down play and just the way things went in the 4th quarter, but most notably the sequence that led to the 3rd down, 4th down, and ultimately the decision to go for it deep in Alabama territory on 4th down, not get any points, and ultimately end up losing the game by a 3-point margin. So that would also be a call out. So that's calling out to the coaching and saying, look, I really think, and again, just to sum up my point of view, and I have heard lots of other people and lots of good damn dogs and other analysts and people I respect say they're totally behind the 4th down call. I understand the idea behind that, but again, I just keep coming back to saying, look, there's the thing you always have to moderate the fourth down call is not just about stats and it's not just about analytics. It's also about where are you in the game, and at that point in the game, you're in the fourth quarter. You're at a point in the game where if you don't score here and then Alabama is able to go and drive the field and score and worst case scenario get a touchdown, now you're going to be down 2 scores with less than 10 minutes to go, maybe less than 7-8 minutes to go in the game, something like that. And you're just really going to have a hard time even fighting your way back to even, which is why I think as awesome as it would have been to just make the statement, get the fourth down, get the touchdown, and take the lead. And I do believe there's a good chance that that lead would have held from that moment. I also believe that it just made a lot of sense in that scenario, having fought so hard to get back, take the easy field goal, tie the game up. The worst case scenario is if your defense, like it did at the end of the second quarter, gets a little soft again, gets gassed, gives up some plays, or they get some momentum and they get rolling and they go down the field and score a touchdown. Now, when you get the ball back, you're going to get the ball back at least one more time with a chance to tie the game up again, and all is not lost. But if you get down 2 scores, now you need a miracle with single-digit time left. With 7, 8, 9, 5 minutes left in the game, you're down 2 scores. The odds are so significantly against you. So that was my coaching call out from last week. I don't know that we'll have a similar coaching call out this week, but let's jump into first impressions, our segment. First of all, first impressions. Great to have a blowout. And by blowout, I'm just saying, look, we won this game by 3 scores. I think anytime you win by 3 scores, that's a blowout. We could argue whether 3 scores include 17 points, 2 touchdowns, and a field goal. But I think so. I think whenever you force a team to have to score 3 times to catch up, I think you've generally blown them out. So it's nice to have a blowout. We've had some blowouts, but this blowout also had the unique nature of being something we haven't actually done in a while, which was starting strong and blowing them out from the get-go, so to speak, which is to say that it wasn't just something that built or we didn't put the game away late. We started out, we were ahead 21-7 at the half. We were able to stretch that lead to 35-7 by the end of the third quarter, up 28 points, and then eventually win 35-14. So, also blowout status, we were a 20, the line on this game opened at 20.5 on the game, and it dropped down at one point to about 18.5 before bouncing up to around 19.5 by the time the game went. So momentum in Vegas looked a little bit against us, but we were able to go out and cover. And this, I haven't gone and looked up the cover stats, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time in a while we've covered in a game like this. So this was comfortable. It was nice. And look, yes, it's Kentucky, and Kentucky is not a good team, and we were supposed to blow them out, right? So that's what you're supposed to do. But sometimes, as you'll hear other announcers and people say, sometimes just doing what you're supposed to do is a sign of being a good team. I mean, you can only do so much. Yes, we could have blown Kentucky out 75-0, but that's not necessary. And, winning comfortably by 3 scores is good enough. And it's worth noting, look, last year's team made it to the college football playoff. At one point late in the season was the number 2 team in the country. We were the SEC. We are the defending SEC champion. Okay. So let's not forget that. But this Kentucky team took us to the, to desperation, really, in the game, right? We ended up being, sorry, I was just going to pull something up. We ended up being just barely winning that game, 13-12. And Kentucky was a 4-8 team last year. They may be heading for a 4-8 record this year. They may be heading for something worse than that. It's hard to say at this time. But they look to be still a bottom team in the SEC this year as they were last year. But just because they were a bottom team in the SEC last year doesn't mean that it's nothing to go in there and play a game against them and win by 3 scores. And it's worth noting, last year, a team that beat us handily, Ole Miss, and that stumbled or stepped on the rake, as Reese Davis likes to say on his on Game Day and on Game Day podcast, they stepped on the rake against Kentucky last year and they got beat. And they also stepped on the rake against Florida. And they were probably one of the most talented teams in the country. We've mentioned that before. And yet they didn't make the playoff. They were just on the outside looking in because they took on a third loss. And whether that was the Florida loss late in the year or the Kentucky loss earlier in the year, still, that was Kentucky's only win in the SEC. But but they were an extremely talented team. They took us apart 28-10, and that being Ole Miss, and Kentucky beat Ole Miss. So again, there are no givens. You can't just accept or expect. You can look at it and say, this is what ought to happen. And I think we can all look at this and say what happened on Saturday with Kentucky is what ought to have happened. But I don't think we can say that it should, there was by no means a guarantee. Let's put it that way. And just a quick word, Kentucky has been a tough team for us. It feels like they're a team that plays us tough. And we remember barely eking out the win last year, 13-12. And it's true that we also had a game in the 2022 season, which was our undefeated, probably maybe the best team in the history of Georgia football. Hard to say, but that's your undefeated, untied, unnothing national championship team, right? The team that wins the national championship game 65-7. Well, that same team went to Lexington and only won 16-6 in a slog fest of a game, right? And then you go back to, we were in Lexington in 2020, and that was the COVID year, and we won 14-3. So Kentucky has this strange history of being able to play us close, but that actually has only been in Kentucky. This year we won 35-14 at home. 2 years ago we won 51-13 at home, and 2 years before that we won 30-13 at home. And as you go further back, that 30-13, that was against a Kentucky team that was definitely in the top 25, maybe even in the top 15 that year. So I think that team finished 10-3. So I don't think they finished in the top 15, but nonetheless, just wanted to throw out some perspective. Look, blowing out Kentucky felt good. It was a good thing. That's my first impression there. Number two on the first impressions, we did what has been talked about. There's been a lot of ideas saying we need to start fast. And I think start fast is maybe, people use that a lot, and I'm not really comfortable with it. I'm not sure that that's really the right thing to either be asking for, the right term for it. But what I will say we did, and I think was good about what we did, was that well, this is to say, I'm not exactly sure what starting fast. I would go on the side of the coaches here and say, look, I think the coaches had what they thought was a plan to start adequately in the last couple games. Bobo was ready to call up a brilliant 45-yard pass on the first play when we got the ball. We were already down 7-0 because Tennessee got the ball first in the Tennessee game. That's what I'm talking about, if you just had to guess where I was going, since I did introduce that. But going back 2 games to the Tennessee game, the first time we get the ball, we dial up a 45-yard pass, we march right down the field, and we score. Now, that at the time, we were already down 7-0, so that tied the game up 7-7. And then Tennessee, of course, gets the ball and goes right back down the field and scores again. And then we don't execute on the next drive, and they end up getting up 21-7. And then we have to fight our way back to getting back to 21-17 towards the half. But offensively, we came out ready, slinging, and looked great initially, right? So starting fast isn't just firing the ball down the field. And on defense, a lot of starting fast is basically just not letting the other team score, right? So what's happened to us each of the last 2 games against Tennessee and Alabama is that they have been able to come out, both those teams were able to come out in the first and second quarters and execute their offense at a high level. And it took us a while to adjust and start getting back to where the game became more of a 50-50 game. Both teams able to sometimes move, sometimes not move, and score. So, I don't know if start fast is the right idea. I don't know that you have to come out every game and try to go out like with your hair on fire and do something special. But what I would say, could agree if by start fast you mean come out and execute. And what I just talked about calling out the coaches from the Alabama and Tennessee game, saying, look, I'm not sure we were prepared right at the beginning, because it looked like they knew those teams knew what they could do against us. And while we were able to make adjustments in the game, and in both cases right the ship and be able to come either all the way back or almost all the way back, I think that, I'm proud of those coaching adjustments, but I'd look at it and say, why haven't we done more to disrupt them? Or they seem to know exactly what they could get off of us early in the game. And once they had sort of exhausted those early, we know we can do this, and we made the adjustments, then it became pretty much a fair fight. Well, I would like to see, and I think we all want to see us not dig a hole to start these important games, right? It's just so much more pressure and so much harder to dig out of the hole. And again, Against Tennessee, we were able to dig all the way out of the hole, even take a lead. Could have even had a bigger lead than we did, and the only reason we ended up in that they had to miss a field goal to get to overtime thing is because we didn't actually execute enough to put as much of a padding on the lead as we could have. Well, Alabama did the same thing. We were able to slow them down, and they did not score in the second half. They were not able to put enough points on the board to be comfortable. It came down to the final plays of the game for Alabama to beat Georgia. But we dug too deep a hole. Alabama was a little better than Tennessee at being able to fend off our comeback, and we had dug too big a hole. So I don't think it's starting fast as much as it is starting to execute from the beginning, being prepared as a coaches, being prepared as players, and executing from play one so that you don't dig yourself into a hole. And so, because I'm not always comfortable, I see that all the time where it's where people are like, well, yes, we've had games in the past, and over the last 5 years, there have been plenty of games where Georgia has gone out and just dominated and been up huge early in the game and then coasted to an easy win. But I don't think it's fair to think that a blowout is not still a blowout or valuable just because you were 3-3 or you were 7-3 at the half, and then you scored 30 unanswered in the second half and you won 37-3. I mean, that's still a blowout, right? And by the end of the game, it was quite comfortable. So I think what I'm more impressed by, or what I think is a team that, as we go back to this idea of comparing and identifying, who is a contender, how do we stack up for the SEC, for the playoffs? I think I want to see periods in which our team can dominate football games. Yes, I would love to see them dominate every football game, all 4 quarters. But I think we know that's unrealistic. So, but if you see a team that just kind of slogs its way through every game, and every game is kind of a coin flip, and it just depends on the bounce of a ball, the missing of a field goal, the inches of a first down call, yes or no, on a critical third or fourth down, that's excruciating, and that's not a team that's really controlling the game. But a team that can control the game for 2 or 3 quarters in the game, at any point in the game, well, that can be powerful. And especially if you don't start, maybe the opposite of start fast, you don't start slow, or you don't fail to execute early in the game and dig a big hole. Last year against Alabama, we dug a huge hole. We were down 28-0. Then we dominate. And I think, if I remember the scoring right, I think we win the remainder of the game 31-7 or something like that. Whatever it is, we dominate the remaining 3 quarters. Even though they scored at the end to win, we still dominated the remaining 3 quarters of the game. So we showed that we could dominate a really good team on the road, but we had just dug such a big hole in the beginning through absolutely being out-coached, out-schemed at the start of the game, and out-executed, that it was, even though we actually had come all the way back and taken a lead, we made ourselves vulnerable to losing on one big play, which is what had happened, right? So I think that, yes, we started fast, but what we really did was we just started executing from the get-go. And we kind of flipped the script this week compared to what Alabama had done to us last week, where they came out and they executed 2 long, like over 10 play drives, chewing up 5, 6, 8 minutes and putting 2 touchdowns on the board. They were up 14-0. Actually, and we did that against Kentucky this week. We go out, we have a 12 and a 16 play drive, I think it is. And we go down the field and we put up points, and we're up 14-0. And we forced a quick punt from Kentucky in the middle of that. So we get 12 plays, 75 yards and a touchdown in 6 minutes. We had 13 plays, 96 yards in 5 minutes. In between, Kentucky had the ball for 2 minutes and 41 seconds. They went 5 plays and punted after 16 yards. But then, actually, almost just like what we did to Alabama, we got the ball back. They got the ball back on their next drive, just like when we got the ball back after Alabama went up 14-0, and we scored in like 4 plays, 75 yards, and it was 14-7. You thought, okay, maybe we can get on this better, right? Well, actually, Kentucky does the same thing. They go 4 plays, 75 yards. And so that was a little disappointing to see the defense stop executing. And that was really just 2 big plays. In that 75-yard drive, we gave up what was it? It was a 38-yard pass to Kendrick Law, a former Alabama player who transferred, and then a 29-yard pass to the tight end right over the middle. And we looked unprepared for that. So we gave up a couple big plays, and now all of a sudden it's a 1-score game again. And much like what Alabama did to us, we then turned around and reasserted our dominance, scored another touchdown. made it 21-7 again, and they had 2 3 and outs in the interim in there. We did have an interception in there. Gunner threw his first interception of the year, but overall, we seem to be controlling that game again, just like Alabama was able to continue controlling the game for much of the first half and get enough points to get too big a lead for us to catch back up. So we did start fast, but again, I think, well, here's the other thing I guess I would say about it is what also felt great about this idea of starting fast or executing really well at the beginning is you have to go all the way back to the Texas game, mid-October of last year, or mid-late October, I guess it was like October 19th or whatever, to have a game where we played a Power 5, an SEC, a big-time opponent, an opponent that you feel threatened by. You have to go all the way back to that Texas game to find a time where Georgia played a game that feels like the kind of games that we all get excited about and that we think could become a hallmark of the Kirby Smart era, when in a big moment, Georgia just comes up and just shows that they can just dominate a game, right? We came out against Texas and we used a furious pass rush and a strong run game to get the score at 23-0 at the half. And so the game ended up 30-15. There was the controversial call and all the trash on the field, and everybody remembers that. But we jump out to a good lead, we hold on, we play keep away, and we win the game convincingly. And that's really the last time until this week that Georgia has played, and obviously Kentucky is not on the level of Texas, despite what happened to Texas this week at Florida. That's another discussion. But obviously Kentucky is not Texas. But I'm just saying, look, there's an SEC game. There's a game. It's been that long since we've gone out and just taken care of business early in a game like this. I would say earlier, before the Texas game last year, we also had the Auburn game, which we won 31-13. And that's an example of what I was talking about. Maybe you don't have to start so fast. You just don't have to dig a hole. You just have to execute and continue playing the right way and then get the breaks or get the opportunities when they come in front of you. But don't dig a big hole. Don't make huge mistakes. Don't get out schemed and outplayed early on. The Auburn game was a good example of that last year. That game was before the Texas game. So you go back to the Texas game as the last time. Auburn was earlier in October. We ended up winning that game 31-13. And this is instructive since it's Auburn week. We'll get to this. But we were only leading 7-3 late in the second quarter. And before we put on a touchdown just before the half to go up 14-3. Then it was in the third quarter before we stretched it out to an 18-point lead. Auburn closed the gap a little bit, but then we put it back to an 18-point lead and win 31-13. And so that's a game where we never just blew Auburn out. And at the time, people sort of, yawn, ho-hum. Yes, Auburn's not that good. Georgia beat them. They kind of slogged their way through it. They were barely leading just before the half. Well, I think that's an unfair assessment. I think this is what we need to see this team getting back to, is either being able to control the game early and build a sizable lead and hold on to it, like this game against Kentucky, or the Auburn game makes a good example of where you didn't make any big mistakes, you didn't do anything amazing, but you were in the right position to just keep pounding away, and ultimately you built a 3-score win, an 18-point win. An example of going the other way in a game after that was also last season but showed kind of the cracks in the armor was the Florida game last year, where we trailed 13-6 at the half. And so that's a game where you made mistakes. You didn't execute well. You got out schemed by a team that's really not as good as you. And we did go on to win the second half 28-7. So again, that speaks to what I was talking about a minute ago, where you judge the team. You say, look, obviously that was still a playoff team, an SEC championship team in the making. And they showed that by riding the ship and being able to assert their power and their authority in that game, outscoring their opponent 28-7 in the second half. But that game was always closer and felt a little more tense than it probably should have. You only actually won by 2 scores because you were down 13-6 before you took control of the game. To be down 13-6 against a team like Florida, you had to be not executing well from the get-go. You did get out schemed. You did get outplayed one way or the other early in that game by a team you should have been beating. So the other third first impression of this game is it felt great to see Georgia being Georgia again. And I think that I've already kind of said that a little bit in here, but it just feels like we came out, we took control, we were in control the whole time. Yes, we gave up a drive near the end of the first half and they could have scored, but they missed the field goal. Yes, they got the ball first to start the second half and then we get the turnover and it just works into a blowout. But Overall, this was the kind of game that Georgia needed, and I think also given that what we're going to keep saying and we've been saying is I think we're realizing more and more how young some of these guys are. We don't even know who some of these guys are. I'm still seeing guys make plays and then having to check the depth chart and say, hey, who was that guy? I saw number 90 make a play in the game this week, and because Jordan Hall had to go out of the game. And hopefully he'll be well. I have not heard any details, or I haven't dug into the details yet on the injury report. I've heard there's some optimism that Monroe Freeling's ankle will be okay for this upcoming week. I don't know if Ernest Graham's back is going to get better enough for him to finally start playing. And Micah Morris left the game for a while on Saturday against Kentucky, but came out, but has been dealing with hand and shoulder issues. And so he was a warrior and got back out there. So kudos to him. But Jordan Hall, who has been a guy that we've sort of been just waiting to be the next dominant defensive lineman, finally, he's had a ton of injuries in his career, and he finally seems to be getting the kind of playing time and reps that you have to take talent and execute. And so it was a shame to see him go out of the game. I was hoping it was nothing terribly serious. But so I saw number 90 get on the field and make a play. And I thought, oh, look, there's somebody making a fresh 90. Who's that? It's Elijah Griffin. Well, sorry about that. So, and so I'm still looking up, who some of these guys are. So I think we've got to be happy to see us Georgia be Georgia again, because some of these guys are not, they maybe have been on the sideline, or they've been a part of the program, or they certainly sat in the stands as recruits and watched Georgia have these powerful blowout games that we've had before and just take down opponents and do what you're supposed to do. But it hasn't happened a lot in the last 10, 15 games. And so a lot of these young guys who are stepping into these roles, having had so many guys go on either transfer portal or pro or just run out of eligibility, and now we got these new young guys on the team, it's good for them to get to see the fruits of their labor. This is what happens when you work hard in practice, is you go out and you out execute, you outplay, you out talent the other team, and you get to enjoy it. You get to have fun. You get to dance around on the sideline knowing that this game's in hand, and watch some of the other younger guys, even younger than you, get some experience. And that's also something that has hurt us. There weren't enough games last year, and there haven't been enough games this year. Our first two sort of practice games early in the year, we didn't get enough opportunity to get young guys in the game. So Georgia being Georgia again, it's great to see young guys getting in the game in the third and fourth quarter in a SEC game, so that we get to see some new guys and know that everybody's getting the experience of being a part of what's going on, good things at Georgia football. So also, I just want to say, my impression was I liked the offense. I liked what I saw, good things. I saw some creative things. I think everybody has a tendency to get a little hard on Bobo, and I'm not saying he hasn't earned that from time to time, although I think his track record still speaks for itself as far as being an overall above average to really excellent offensive coordinator. But I don't know, there's always going to be moments when it comes down, like last week against Alabama, when you look at the total yardage and you say, and the total amount of points on the board, you say we only scored 21 points. We didn't even get to 400 yards. Those are tough asks against a team as talented as Alabama, but that's also going in what you need to do. If you want to guarantee that you're going to win against any opponent, put at least 400 yards up of offense up, put at least 30 something points up, and then you should have a chance against anybody. Okay. So when you go out and you have 357 yards like we did last week against Alabama, and you put 21 points on the board, that's not enough to beat a lot of teams. So, or you at least put yourself in jeopardy of even potentially losing to a lesser team, much less than a team that's maybe equal to you. So I like what we saw from the offense. The tight ends got involved. We saw some actually passes that weren't just mistakes or bailouts to the tight end, like bailing Gunner out, but like he actually ran an RPO early in the first half, where it was a run pass option. He takes the ball out, he holds onto it, he decides to pass it. His first read is to a tight end who catches it over the middle. It's Elias Williams, and he catches the ball and has a nice gain. And Josh Brock on the radio broadcast was so enthused, he called it out in that moment. Look at that, it's a tight end, a design pass to a tight end. And, so we have to feel good about that. And Chauncey Bowens looked good. Nate Frazier gets back in the game and he looks better, is building some confidence. And we saw a lot of Dylan Bell. Dylan Bell had a really nifty, huge play in the Alabama game, gained over 40 yards on an end around. In this game, he scores on a reverse, on an end around. He has a couple huge catches, including a nifty one-handed catch, and so he is much more involved in the offense these last 2 weeks, and we really like seeing that. And overall, while the defense may not have been as dominant as defenses in years gone by, I think we have to feel like it felt like the defense was much more in control of this game again, and they did. They only yielded the 14 points. The last touchdown for Kentucky came late in the game after Puglisi, our second string quarterback, was in the game through an ugly interception that allowed the ball to be deep in our territory. So there was only, I think they started at our 23. And we had all third and fourth string and maybe beyond third and fourth string guys in the game at that time, which is no excuse. But so basically they got the ball with 23 yards to go against third, fourth, and beyond stringers, and they were able to put another touchdown on. So the first string defense, though, as I had the stats, held Kentucky to 191 yards and 7 points through three quarters. So they generally dominated the game. Now, Kentucky is not. Just a quick word on the first impressions. Let's be clear. Kentucky is not a good team. I said they're 4-8 last year. They're now 2-3 this year. They were 2-2 coming in, and they're in the bottom of the table. No matter how you look at it, they're in the bottom 2 or 3 of offensive yards generated, defensive yards allowed, offensive points scored, defensive points allowed. So, I mean, there's very little you can point to. What you can say is that Kentucky does seem to play hard. I give Mark Stoops credit for that. They always seem to play hard. They play tough. They do run the ball well. They came into the game averaging 180 yards a game rushing, and they had a running back who was getting an average of, I think, about 86 to 90 yards a game. He was like third or fourth or second, something like that, in the SEC coming into the game. So they presented a challenge that you knew they were going to try to be tough, physical, and run the ball. And Seth McGowan, he's a guy who looks like a quality SEC back no matter where you go. So I think, Kentucky is not a good team, but also their quarterback. They made the point this is a young guy who's having to play because their starter, Calzada, who's been around the SEC forever, authored that amazing knocking off number 1 Alabama back many, many years ago when he was at Texas A&M. I think this is his 7th year in college football, but he was supposed to be the starter. He's injured. So this kid had to come in. His name is Cutter Boley, and he came into the game. This is a guy who they made the point in the broadcast. He was wanted by a lot of schools. Alabama offered him a scholarship, maybe Penn State, I think a few other top schools, Oregon maybe. There's several schools that want this kid. He's a big kid, good arm, very athletic, 4-star quarterback. So he's not ready to be thrown into this just yet, and he wasn't supposed to be, but he has some talent, some capabilities. They have a solid SEC back in Seth McGowan, and they've got their receiving core looks nothing special. They made the point in the broadcast over and over again. They mostly throw the tight ends, but they do have Kendrick Law, who had been a high-level recruit at Alabama and has transferred over to Kentucky, and he had a nice game against us. He had 6 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown, along a 38 on that first touchdown drive. So, they're not completely devoid of talent. So again, they could be a dangerous team, but it was good to see what we did on offense, and it's good to see Georgia being Georgia again, I think. So that's our first impression segments, which covers a lot of detail, but let's jump in and run through some key stats, numbers, and moments in the game. That's our second segment that we'll get to now. So second segment, key stats, numbers, moments. So first number, 1955. We have played Kentucky every year since 1955, and I don't know if you could really call this a rivalry. Georgia has owned this series. After winning this game, we are now 62-12-2 all time in the series. So that's like more than 50 games over 500 in the series. We've now won 16 in a row. We came into this game having won 15 in a row. Now we've won 16 in a row against Kentucky. This is another thing that Mark Richt really righted the ship on when he took over, and Kirby Smart has just continued that. part of what has made Georgia a team that is in the elite position for playoff, national championship, SEC every year now over these last 10 years is, and that doesn't mean we're going to win it every year. That doesn't mean we did win it every year. It just means we're in the position or we're a contender for it. And we've been that way because we win these games. We win 16 straight games against the Kentuckys. It's very, very difficult when you're going to have Alabama and Texas and Ole Miss and even Georgia Tech, who's on the rise this year on your schedule, to also go out there and not win the games like this against a Kentucky. And so winning games like this 16 times in a row, that's a key part of establishing this sort of elite level dominance. So there's a couple numbers. 1955, we've been playing this rivalry every year, but because of the new schedule and going to the 9-game schedule, Kentucky is not one of our annual opponents going forward, which means that they'll just be on the rotation, which means starting next year, for the first time since 1955, we will not play Kentucky every year. And that makes me a little bit sad because, as you know, I'm big on history, and this is something that's been a tradition. We've been doing it since before I was even alive and long before I was a fan. And it's going to seem odd to not have Kentucky on the schedule. It's been odd not having South Carolina on the schedule the last couple of years. And I made that point when we were talking about these annual opponents. You could have just as easily had Kentucky be in that position along with Auburn and Florida as our one of our 3 annual opponents. But as it turned out, it's going to be South Carolina. We won the yardage battle 425 to 270, a solid 155 plus 155 differential. We won the game by 3 scores. We outrushed Kentucky 180 to 45 yards. That's a 135 yard differential. So most of our yardage differential in this game came on the run game, both shutting down their run game. They had been averaging 180 a game coming into it. They only got 45 yards a game. We've been averaging over 215 yards a game coming in. We only ran actually for 180, our lowest total of the season, but we stayed committed to the run. And so far, with 180 being our lowest of the season, that's very much still continuing the turnaround, both offensively and defensively, again, with the run. And so that trend has continued. We flipped the script from the Alabama game. We were 8 of 12 on third down, and we held Kentucky to 3 of 11 on third down, both excellent numbers and the kind of things you need to see happen. Time of possession, we were about 35 and a half. Time of possession at 26 and a half for Kentucky, and we out first down them 26 to 19. That first down gap is not as big as you'd like to see. The time of possession is great. That shows the game control. So again, the 155 yard differential, the time of possession and the first down, the third down differentials, all the kind of game control you're looking for regardless of who the opponent is. That's that going out and playing your game and executing. Another thing that made it look much like a Georgia game from 3-4 years ago is we just had 1 punt in this game, and it was a beauty. Thorson came out and he pins the ball. Coffin kicked it to the 1. London Humphreys was down there to tap it out just to make sure that it went out of the 1. It looks like it might have on his own, but it was excellent play all the way through. And this is a big difference. We've been punting a lot. Okay. We came into this game having punted 17 times on the season, which is something like, hold on, I'll tell you real quick, 17 out of 4, which is, it's 4.25 punts a game, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in a 12-game season, that puts us on pace to punt 51 times. Let me just tell you how much we punted in the previous several seasons. In 2022, we punted 36 times total for all and again, this includes bowl games, playoff games, everything. 36 total punts. In 2023, 32 total punts. Last year, you saw this creeping up where we were not controlling the game as much and we had to punt more. And so we punted 46 times, but that was still in 14 games, okay? So we've already punted 17 times coming into this game. Like I said, on pace for 51 in just 12 games, as opposed to even last year, 46 in 14 games. So just getting worse and worse. So this was nice to see the trend reverse. Just 1 punt in this game brings the average back down, and hopefully we're moving right back in the direction on that. And again, kudos to Thorson. Amazing if you're going to have a punt that you just have 1 punt like that. We had 2 sacks in this game. Came into the game with only 5 on the season, so that's a big improvement, and 5 tackles for losses. And I'll tell you, one of those sacks was a coverage sack. C.J. Allen got it. He looked like he was shot out of a cannon. He was sort of spying and watching the play. The quarterback rolled out, got outside the pocket, still had the ball in his hands, kind of looking downfield, kind of looking to run. Allen just exploded to him and took him down. So it wasn't it was more of a coverage sack than a pressure sack, but Allen did a great job closing him down and taking that play out. And then the other sack, the true sack, went to one of the young freshmen who got into the game. We'll get to that in a bit. We had 2 interceptions in the game. Or, well, no, on the bad note, we threw 2 interceptions in the game, which is, unhappy. One of them was really ugly, but it was by Puglisi. Puglisi got in the game with a minute and a half or so to go in the third quarter. Again, we were up 35-7, and kudos to the coaches. They started putting guys in the game. They got Gunnar out of the game. He hadn't accumulated a huge number of stats yet, but it was a good idea to get Puglisi in. And on the first drive he's in, he looked really good. He got us down to deep into Kentucky territory, and we ended up going for it on 4th down and not getting any points on that drive. But on a later drive, late in the fourth quarter, he throws an ugly interception, just seemed to airmail everybody, or didn't. It was unclear where he wanted that ball to go. Kentucky intercepted it, got back to our 23, and like we said, scored. So, and then Gunnar also had his first interception of the year. Although I'm a little less critical of that. I like the downfield shots that Bobo was calling, that Gunnar was looking for. He was staying in the pocket nicely, looking for those downfield shots a little bit more. He saw London Humphreys going down the seam with a step on his defensive back, and he was open relative to his defensive back, but Gunnar completely either didn't see or didn't think the free safety would get over there. He did. The free safety undercut the ball. It was sort of a line drive pass, and I think it's one of those, and the announcer said it, if he puts a little more air on that ball, gets it up and over the safety, and instead of trying to hit Humphreys a few yards outside the end zone on a line drive, but floats it into the end zone and lets Humphreys find it in the end zone out of the air, or even jump ball it, then maybe that still works out to be a touchdown. So I don't think it was you don't want to see any interceptions. You don't want to see carelessness with the ball. I don't think it was careless. I think he'll hopefully learn from it. He does tend to put a lot of his balls on line drives. And so once in a while, you got to get the ball a little bit more in the air. And I think that's the idea there. We scored on 5 of 10 drives in the game. So 50% on our drives. That's pretty efficient. And we held Kentucky to only scoring on 2 of 10 drives. The only other thing I would say about that is this was one of those games that kind of crept down a little bit. It hasn't been unusual in the last couple of years to see 12 or 13 drives for each team in the game. So 10 drives in the game is a little bit less. It means you're going to need to, obviously 35 is a decent number. We'd love to see 40 something on the board in the game like this. We could have had it. Again, the possession that Puglisi led down to the inside the Kentucky 10 that went over on downs could have easily been another touchdown. It could have been 42-7 at that point in the game. And so we had the opportunity to put 42 points on the board, but you needed to execute, in that case, 6 of 10 drives. So this is also a function a little bit, I think, of us running a little bit more and just grinding these games down a little bit, having these nice long possessions. Kentucky also, when they were able to drive, they had pretty good long possessions as well. So the plays, we had 71 plays to their 64, back on track a little bit, not the 24-26 play differential we saw early in the season, but not the upside down that we had against Alabama. On defense, I was happy to note that our defense had 2 3-and-outs against Kentucky, and Kentucky had 4 other drives in which they failed to gain 20 yards. They were 20 yards or less, and all total on those drives, those 6 drives, they had 26 plays for 64 yards. We did give up the one drive right before the half. That was 12 plays, 57 yards. We did eventually force them into the field goal, and they missed the field goal, of 26-yard field goal. So we were still up 21-7 at the half. This was a big turning point in the game and a big flow of the game, because this is the same thing. Alabama, the week before, after we had righted the ship and got it to, at that point, 17-14, Alabama was able to, with just 2.5 minutes or so left in the game, just knife through us with no timeouts like we talked about, get a touchdown right before the half, and then they were set to get the ball to start the second half as well. Fortunately, we were able to keep them from scoring in the second half, but still, that score ended up being more than we could overcome. We're down 24-14 at the half. We only get one more score, and the ball game ends 24-21. In this case, Kentucky could have had the chance to kind of undercut us a little bit there and get some kind of points before the half. And then even a field goal, had they made that field goal, would have been 21-10 at the half. They get the ball to start the second half. If they get energized and they come down the field and score a touchdown, it could have been 21-17. Had they got a touchdown, they were at our 8-yard line when they settled for the 26-yard field goal. Had they got a touchdown on that drive right before the half and another touchdown to start the second half, they could have gotten the game all the way back to tied, no matter how good we had started this game. So this is a big turning point in the game that we at least forced them into the field goal. They missed the field goal. I don't think we blocked it, but they missed it. Then they get the ball to start the second half, and C.J. Allen forces a fumble on that first drive, recovers it himself. We get the ball. We ram it right back down a 38-yard drive, all runs. We stuff it in the end zone. We're up 28-7. So the game really turned a lot in those couple drives. It went from it being potentially a one-score, even a tied game if Kentucky had been able to execute, to us being up 28-7 in that same time frame. And then by the time you got to the end of the third quarter, this is really where the game ended for the first stringers and where the coaches started pulling their punches. We ended the third quarter up 416 in yardage, 416 yards to 191. That was a plus 225, which is more like what I would like to have seen for the game. But we did pull back from there a little bit, but that's a nice number. We're up 35-7, so we're up 28 points. We'd out first down them 24-10 at this point, and we'd outgained or had possession of the ball 30 minutes to 17 minutes. So by the end of the third quarter, the fourth quarter was a little bit of a slog in both directions. Our younger guys got in there. They got some experience, but they made some mistakes. Puglisi was 3 of 4, led a nice drive, but throws the ugly interception. The interception leads to a touchdown on a 23-yard drive for Kentucky. Our young guys got in the game and started trying to make some plays. And a lot of guys, we had a drive. Kentucky has a drive that goes 20 plays, 8.5 minutes, 79 yards, and they end up giving the ball over on downs. So we did eventually force the fourth down there and force them into Dominic Kelly was a young defensive back who's in the game. He got picked on and got 2 pass interference calls against him, which is a bit rough. But he would go on to actually have 2 passes defended as the game went on. So you could see him kind of learning right as it was going. So I really, I think that, the fourth quarter was more, we should look at it as more experimental than anything else. The part of the game where we executed and played the game plan and where the starters and second string guys played and executed ended at the third quarter with a 28-point win and a 225 yardage differential. The fourth quarter was a whole different thing. I also do want to make that point. It was good to see the defense finally get that stop, even though Kentucky went 20 plays, 8.5 minutes, 79 yards. Twice we gave them penalty aided third downs. One was a 3rd and 17. They converted at least one fourth down, if not more, on that drive. But on the last fourth down, we stopped it. It was a terrible play. We blew it up with pressure in the backfield. The quarterback had to just chuck it, and Ellis Robinson intercepts it in the end zone, which bought us some extra field position. Instead of getting the ball at the 10, we get the touchback. And but nobody was going to catch that ball but him, and he made an excellent play to do it. He had a nice bounce back game. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think that it was good to see. That's on another hallmark of Georgia games in the last 5 years, is that you see scoring repressed for the other team, because when we do play and just execute throughout the game and dominate throughout the game, we force teams to make fourth down choices. We force teams to give up on the idea of field goals. They're already too far down. They need to play for fourth downs. And then when you can force them into fourth down and then stop fourth down, you may even give up a little bit of yardage, but you keep points off the board and you control the game and you dominate the game. And it was nice to see us create that position again, even if we did suffer a 20 play drive, which I wasn't super excited about. But again, a lot of young guys in the game at that point, and at least part of that was aided by 2 long third downs that were penalty. One of them was a play in which I didn't even see it, but somebody was called for holding or pass interference. Kentucky actually completed a pass, but for less than the first down yardage, and they called the interference on somebody else and gave them the automatic first down. So I'm not saying that wasn't a legitimate call. I didn't see it, but you don't see that a lot where a play is actually completed and they still call it. Okay, that concludes in section 2. So section 3, we're running out of time a little bit. I want to speed through this a little bit, try to stick close to these my goal of having a little bit shorter podcast. Our standouts and callouts for this game: Gunnar Stockton, 244 yards and 3 total touchdowns. So far on the season, he's run for 5 touchdowns and passed for 6, and this is becoming sort of his prototypical game, around 250 yards of offense, combination of running and passing, and 3 touchdowns. Dylan Bell, we mentioned him. He had a spectacular one-handed catch, had 4 catches for 68 yards, was our leading receiver in catches and yards, and he had 2 touchdowns running. So a fabulous game for Dylan Bell. Great to see him back. Elias Williams had 3 catches for 48 yards, and Oscar Delp had 1 catch for 36 yards. So that's 4 catches from the tight ends, over 80 yards. That's really exciting development to see. Kudos to Mike Bobo for getting them more involved in the game. And also Oscar Delp, by the way. I mean, Elias Williams, 27-yard long on one of those plays. So that's great to get that kind of play out of the big tight end. Reminds you of Darnell Washington a little bit, catching that ball and rumbling down the field. And Oscar Delp, by the way, got huge comparisons when he first burst on the scene as a freshman, on the same team with Brock Bowers as the next Brock Bowers. He looked like Brock Bowers. He played like Brock Bowers. It was like having 2 of them in the game sometimes. Well, for the first time in a long time, Oscar Delp looked like Brock Bowers. He caught a pass over the middle and just accelerated past the entire defense until they finally caught him by the feet at the 5-yard line for a 36-yard gain. So yay, Oscar Delp. Nate Frazier got back in the game after being benched following his fumble early in the Alabama game. He had 34 yards on 7 carries, which is almost a 5-yard per carry average, and he had another catch for 11 yards. So he was useful. He looked fast. He looked good. And Chauncey Bowens continued being excellent. 70 yards, 4 yards receiving. CJ Allen was a difference maker. I mean, we know he is our top linebacker, or at least one of our top linebackers. We know he's a guy that could be an NFL guy in the future, but he had one of his first real standout games, I would say, this game, where, again, he had a sack, he had 2 tackles for loss, he had the strip of the running back and the recovery for the fumble, the strip and the recovery all at one time. He was truly a difference maker in this game. And if the defense is if we're going to believe that we're seeing some progress from the defense, we've got to see some guys step up and be difference makers like that. And CJ Allen was a difference maker in this game. Anybody could be happy with that kind of performance. Ugboko, I think is his name, another young guy who had a sack and a tackle for loss, also got in the game late, probably more rotation there again with Jordan Hall being out, but also just the way the game went, we got more guys in there. So congratulations to him. Like to see him in there. Elijah Griffin, I mentioned before, caused some pressure and he got in the game, number 90, so it was good to see him playing some. Ellis Robinson had a nice game. He had a much ballyhooed bad performance in the last game or 2. He got picked on against Tennessee, he got picked on against Alabama. In both cases, he gave up easy inside leverage to receivers who just basically stepped over the line and caught slants for touchdowns, and he was questioned about that. And then he had the questionable diving over the top penalty. Just hadn't really looked like the 5-star we know he's supposed to be, but he had the interception. He had a pass defended in this game and looked like a decent bounce-back game for him. I already mentioned Dominic Kelly, who gave up 2 penalties, but then came back to defend 2 passes as the latter part of that game went on. And a young guy, another young defensive front guy, Jordan Thomas, got some playing time. Overall, I want to call out Bobo. I think I sort of already mentioned this. I think he had a really nice game. He kept the run game going, and he had to deal with a lot on the offensive line. I mean, Monroe Freeling goes out early in the game. Micah Morris goes out for a while. Ernest Green didn't play from the beginning. So but the line generally seemed to hold up pretty well. There were some moments when, especially when Morris first went out or Freeling went out, we had a whole drive that got blown up because they sent pressure right into the new guy who came in, and that's to be expected. It was a third down play. But overall, I think generally he did a good job of calling plays, knowing that, you can't make the line hold up forever. Still, we had some nice strikes downfield, and Gunner took advantage of that. We continued to run the ball with authority, and that looked good. And getting Dylan Bell in the game a lot more, like we already talked about, was impressive. And the play that he scored his second running touchdown, and the play that put us up 28-7 early in the second half, was an incredibly slick play. The reverse wasn't just an end around; it was a reverse. And by the time they executed that reverse, Dylan Bell could have walked in the end zone. He kicked it a little bit to make sure he got there, but that was just that was a cool play. That was one of those plays that when you saw it happening, yes, you're happy you're scoring the touchdown, but you're also like, wow, look at that. That was a cool play. And again, I already mentioned getting the tight ends involved, but I want to point out something that was a little different. We saw Elias Williams in the game in the second quarter. He was making a catch. So it did look like there's some changes. Also, one thing, I didn't see anything come of it, but at least once, maybe more than once, I saw Chauncey Bowen split out from the backfield and go out to the widest position as one of the 5 wideouts. We did not throw to him in that case. I don't know if that's just trying to make the defense do something or something they want to do something with at another time. But again, I saw more creativity. I saw more creativity overall from the offensive play calling. I saw us getting our tight ends involved, and I saw us continue to have good running game and feature the right running backs, and work around the fact that we were playing a heavily patchworked defensive or offensive line throughout the game. So, and I also want to call out the coaches. I think they did a good job on going ahead and making the decision to not be greedy and go for more yards and points, but go ahead and start subbing in liberally before the end of the third quarter. I think that was the right case. We need more opportunities for these young guys to get in a game like this and just have fun and enjoy, after all the hard work they do at practice, enjoy being part of a game like this where you're just winning big and getting the experience. And so good for them. And I did want to make the point, I think offensively too, I noticed we only ended up at 425 yards of offense. We've actually been pretty consistent offensively in that regard. We've had here, I can find it real quick. But overall, we've had very nice consistency at offense. Our total offensive numbers have been, let's see, I've got that here, 488, 421, 502. Only last week against Alabama, 357. But as I told you last week, we actually had our highest yard per play average of the season in that game. We just didn't have enough plays. Alabama kept the ball away from us and we only had 53 plays. This week we come back, we have 71 plays and 425 yards, still a 6 yard per play average, which is nice. But I think we would have ended up closer to 500 yards. We had 2 touchdown drives that started on Kentucky territory, one that went for 38 and one that went for 40. But we were moving well. One of them was all run plays. So it's reasonable to expect, had we started those drives deeper back in our territory, say they were 65 and 75 yard drives, you might have had another 40, 50, 60 yards of offense. And you might have seen this game be more like a 500 yard offensive output had we needed to go that far to score the 35 points. We didn't, and so we didn't. Kind of a double thing on that. The only thing I'd call out on the call-outs to this week was I still think that while the defense did a much better job overall, this is one of the worst offensive teams in college football, or not in college football, but at least in the SEC. They only average about 26, 27 points a game and about 350, 380 yards a game of offense. So we held them under their averages. You always feel like you do a good job when you did that. We did get a couple sacks, tackles for loss. We did create our first fumble recovered for the season. And that's something we still haven't done very much. We only have 5 takeaways so far on the season defensively. So we're not sacking the quarterbacks a lot. We're getting some pressure, but not a lot, and we're not creating a lot of turnovers. So we're just really we have a defense right now that's really just having to play man-on-man defense across the board, essentially, and try to win. And that can be a tall task. And so I still think that, and I've heard some other people, I don't know who it was. It might have been in the Game Day podcast with Reese Davis. It might have been in the the Dawg Nation daily podcast with Brandon Adams. Might have been a Georgia dog former great, who said this, but I heard somebody and I really agreed with it. I remember nodding. I was working out and listening, and they said they would like to see more creativity from the Georgia defense. And I think that's a key. I do think we need to see some more creativity. We got to see the coaches do a little bit more to help these guys out. They're not just at the level yet which they can dominate. We saw steps forward this week. They did a nice shutdown game, but they should have. This was not a good offensive team. They did what they should have. They got a couple sacks. They got a couple turnovers. They held them under 300 yards. They held them to 14 points or less. These are all numbers we feel good about. We had a nice yardage differential because we were able to put up over 400 yards and hold them under 300. We had time of possession. We had all the things we want to see to control the game. But we just would like to see a little more dominance out of the defense. And maybe that's going to have to come with a little bit of coaching creativity. Okay, so that gets us through segment 3. That's our standouts and callouts for today. So that brings us to the end of today's podcast. We will start digging into this history and a little bit of the series history with Auburn, and start breaking down the Auburn game a little bit, looking at what we did, what we've been doing and what Auburn's been doing. Where have they been? Let's talk about Hugh Freeze, how he matches up with Kirby Smart, what their tendencies are, what we can expect from them, what they've done so far this season. So we're going to break that down. We're going to look at the history of the series, and we're going to work our way as we get to the end of the week towards getting to our outcomes, our true outcomes, and our predictions like we do every week. So thank you for being back with us. Didn't quite get this one as short as I talked about, but a little bit shorter and a little bit more focused. I hope you appreciate the effort. If you do, please make sure you pass on the information. Let's get more people coming to be a part of the Daily Dawg. I really appreciate if you help people find us so we can just continue to expand this conversation. So those of us that just love this team and just want to not be pie in the sky crazy about it, but be realistic, but have an honest and good conversation each day, a little bit of time thinking about our team and comparing to where we are, comparing these series histories, learning a little about, what we think should happen, what has happened historically, what does it mean, what's it all going to mean in the big picture for the national championship or playoff potential, all of that. Bring more people into this conversation. Please invite them to come. Just get them to go to thedailydawg.com is the easiest way. They can find anything they need to from there. You can share with them however you find these podcasts. They're available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and we do post when the new information is available, also on Facebook and Instagram. So we'll continue to try to expand those options and give you more ways to get people to come and be a part of this conversation. Please message me from Instagram, from Facebook, from thedailydawg.com, from the chats, from email to thedailydawg.com, any of the above. Love to hear from you guys. Hope you have a great week as we build towards the Auburn game later this week. Hope you've had a good Monday so far. I look forward to being back with you tomorrow on Tuesday. And until then, go Dogs.